All right, our next guest is with us, and I'm so excited. We have Carl Szabo, Vice President and General Counsel for NetChoice. Thank you, Carl, for coming on this evening.
Thanks for having me, Stacy. And let me just say, even if it were not for the storm, I suspect your grocery stores would still be missing a lot of items today.
Well, yeah, they're missing items normally because of Joe Biden, but this is like, it looks like the apocalypse when there's a storm coming in. We're expecting 6 to 9 inches here as of the last report. So that means people have to buy like 6 loaves of bread each and, 4 dozen of eggs. And it's just so weird because who eats that much bread? Even if you're stuck at home, it doesn't mean you're eating bread all the time. Like, what's happening with it? Are you stuffing it in your pillow to sleep on? I don't get it, but it happens every single time. The entire 20 some odd years we've lived here, every time there's a storm, within 48 hours, all the bread and the eggs and the milk are gone. Sometimes there's no more bottled water either, but it will pass. I mean, some of those things will be restocked. So let's talk about this. This is censorship. This is censorship in real time, where if you've ever not understood what cancellation was about, or you didn't believe censorship was real, you can watch it happening to Joe Rogan right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I'm a longtime Joe Rogan fan, and could you imagine if the Trump administration's chief surgeon general came out and said, we need to shut down a talk show host, we need to shut down a radio host because they're spreading information we don't like? No, of course not. Liberals and Democrats would flip a table. This is an example of President Trump trying to exert totalitarian power. But that's exactly what we're seeing out of the Biden administration Surgeon General just within the past couple of hours. He said, we must root out misleading speech. We must root out misleading speech. This is something you would hear out of like a Ministry of Truth 1984 type scenario. But here we have the U.S. Surgeon General taking time out from a global pandemic, from a time when we have highest opioid deaths in years, when we have time when our kids can't go to school because of a pandemic, and he's taking time out of his schedule to go and seek out Joe Rogan and bemoan him for misleading speech. This is terrible. And what's even more concerning for me, and we're seeing this all across the country, is that whether it is people on the left with respect to the Biden administration and the U.S. Surgeon General going after people for hosting certain types of speech, we're seeing Republicans on the other side going after platforms for not hosting enough speech. And at the end of the day, it's liberals and conservatives inviting the government to dictate what type of speech a private business can and cannot host. And that's just, for me as a conservative, very concerning.
Yeah, it's a little bit too much, as they like to say. So I wanted to find out, since you have been a long-term fan of Joe Rogan, what did you think about his statements last night on Sunday evening where he was saying, he understands why they're putting a flag or a little message on his podcast. He understands that he maybe needs to have some help with his booking because he books all the guests himself. What did you make of that?
One of the things that's really appealing about Joe Rogan is, for many of us, we are out there and we're seeing things happen in our society, in our neighborhoods, and we're being told the exact opposite. We're being told that we're the crazy ones, that, don't believe your lying eyes is probably the way to think about it. You and I were just talking about the lack of stuff on our grocery store shelves. We've got people in the media telling us, oh, no, of course, everything's fine. There's no supply chain issue. And that's one of the things that I think Joe Rogan really taps into, was telling Americans, telling people, no, you're not crazy. You're not missing something that's right before your eyes, and giving us an opportunity to see a different side of the issue. Now, one of the things that concerns me is this kind of knee-jerk reaction, right? The Biden administration comes out and you've got Surgeon General both blaming new media sources for all of the pandemic's problems. Well, I'm sorry, but You're the president of the United States. You're the leader of the free world, and you're afraid of Joe Rogan. And what we're seeing from Spotify, and I suspect Joe Rogan's under incredible pressure from Spotify, we're starting to see Spotify kowtow to the complaints of the Biden administration. We're starting to see pressure being exerted on the previously independent Joe Rogan to begin monitoring and limiting what he is saying to appease a certain group. And this is the real dangers. We're seeing politicians get in the middle of allowing artists to be artists, allowing news to be news. And it's not just coming from the Biden administration, it's coming from both sides of the aisle. And what we need to do is just get out of the way and let businesses be business, let Joe Rogan be Joe Rogan.
So let's delve into that a little bit, because I've had a lot of feelings about this. First off, about maybe it hasn't been 2 weeks, I don't think, since there was a graphic that was posted and it went viral. And the graphic had Joe Rogan, his name at the top, and then a bar going across, and then the number 11 million. And then it had Tucker Carlson, and then it had the bar going like just a hair across and 3.4 million. And then down, and at the bottom, it had CNN at 880,000. So less than 1 million. And I was, you know how you'll be scrolling and you have to stop for a second and go, wait, what was that? So you scroll back up. And I looked and I'm like, wait, Joe Rogan has 11 million podcast listeners? Maybe I heard that before, but this graphic really makes it obvious that he's bigger than all of the rest of them combined. One podcast outpaces all of these other shows. And remember, up until I saw that graphic, if you asked me who the biggest was, I'd say Tucker Carlson. He's the biggest. What's the biggest network? Fox. Even though the others total more than Fox, biggest individual network, Fox. So I was kind of surprised by it. And I've watched a few of his podcasts, but he's not my speed. Like, I'm just somebody's mom on YouTube, and he's got that whole, he's edgy. He does a lot of cursing, and some of the subjects that he covers are not of interest to me at all. But the COVID-19 stuff has been really eye-opening, because he's had people on who've expressed their viewpoints, and then it's enabled me to say, oh, I agree with that, or, oh, I don't know if I agree with that. But it gives me a chance to hear something I can't hear anywhere else, and then I can make up my own mind. And as an adult, I think that's the point. That's why people are listening to him, because he actually trusts the people who watch the podcast or listen to it to make up their own mind. He actually will ask these questions of these guests where you're kind of like, oh, wow, he's getting a little adversarial. Or he'll kind of blow them off a little bit while they're talking. Or he'll say, oh, wow, that's fascinating, and then ask a question that's completely off the wall. And the person, he doesn't let them off the hook. They have to answer. That's the kind of stuff people want to listen to. Even if you don't agree with Joe Rogan, you have to admit he's a great interviewer and he has interesting people on. The announcement he made yesterday made me feel like maybe that's at an end. He says he takes responsibility for booking the guests, and maybe he needs help with that. That sounds like they're going to put somebody on the show to book stuff for him.
And that's exactly what many of us are worried about. This is the type of crackdown on somebody who becomes successful, and it's being driven by those in power, right? Think about the creation of the printing press, right? It was one of the greatest gifts of knowledge to people. But who hated it? Well, the kings and queens who controlled the power. And with the advent of the internet, with the advent of podcasting, we are seeing kind of this power shift dynamic away from CNN, away from the Washington Post, away from the Beltway news media, to actual individuals to begin having a voice. And Joe Rogan did a great job and a fantastic job of really tapping into that. And to your point, he is tough on his guests. He is hitting a myriad of people. And one of the things that's really stuck out to me is, why is Joe Rogan more trusted than perhaps the U.S. Surgeon General? And it's maybe because of the loss of trust in our institutions. And this is one of the things that I think President Trump's administration really did help to elucidate for a lot of us, is just maybe the news media isn't what we thought it was. I remember growing up on Meet the Press, for example, where they would actually ask tough questions of the guests. And now it's a bunch of softballs. It's a, ideal guest, and then we're just going to ask you to confirm it or get on a stage. And today's media, we just lost trust in it because it's really hard to detect the difference between whether something's an opinion and whether something's an article. And then here comes Joe Rogan, and he is asking tough questions. He is providing a new way of looking at stuff. And one of the things he really pointed out during the COVID that nobody seemed to want to talk about is self-health. Going out and getting exercise, going out and eating right, going out and getting some vitamins in your system, not just because of COVID, but because it's healthy. Because the number one killer last year was heart disease. And that's one of the things that I think Joe Rogan's really tapped into, is reminding the American people that there's more than just the narrative that's being rammed down our throats.
Yeah, there is more than a narrative, but in some ways, he's demonstrating the very thing that we've all hated. We've hated the censorship on YouTube. We've seen what they've done to Dan Bongino. We hate the censorship on Twitter. We see what they did to Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and, so many other small accounts that don't get any attention. And now here we are, and Joe Rogan with 11 million followers, he feels too big to take away. But they did take away, President Trump had 88 million followers on Twitter. They took those away. So there isn't anybody who's too big. It basically means freedom of speech is over. If Joe Rogan is made to bow down and start, have a booker on his show who will basically, if there's a pitch for somebody about COVID-19, the booker will say, oh yeah, we're not going to take that person. And what will Joe Rogan do? If his podcast is controlled by them, can he do anything on YouTube? If he does, will YouTube take him down for going outside of Spotify's guidelines? I mean, is he going to end up on Getter and, Rumble with the rest of us who are, trying to forge a new world?
I mean, one of the things that kind of encourages me, and keep in mind, I'm 100% a free market individual. I'm a originalist when it comes to the Constitution, and I believe in the market itself. I think the market will adjust to demand, and we are seeing that. If Joe Rogan decided Spotify had gone too far or goes too far, and keep in mind, he got $100 million to go over to Spotify. He can quit, and he can say, I'm going to go to Rumble. And he made a similar announcement not too long ago. If he did that, his 100 million subscribers would follow him. They'd follow him to Rumble, and he would have a platform where he would have more freedom. Spotify, keep in mind, we're not talking about an American company. We're talking a foreign company with respect to Spotify. And when you are working for somebody, you need to acquiesce to what they want, and that's what you're seeing here. So the marketplace is providing. So you've got Rumble, over 70 million monthly active users is being created. You've got President Trump's new social media platform. You've got a data center basis called RightForge, which has evolved to create a basis on which these social media platforms can operate without having to rely on things like Microsoft's Azure system or Oracle to host the systems. You've got now RightForge. So the marketplace, granted, it doesn't work at light speed, but it works a hell of a lot faster than government. And it is creating a marketplace where people can compete. And Senator Rand Paul the other day said, look, if we don't like YouTube, I'm off YouTube. I'm going over somewhere else. And people can vote with their feet. And that's what we're seeing. So, yes, is it unfortunate when we see things that happen like this? Absolutely. But the marketplace is providing alternatives. And just like we've seen people leave California and New York, people are voting with their feet online as well. And it's a heck of a lot easier for me to move from YouTube to Rumble than it is for me to move from New York to Florida.
It is true. It is harder to move from New York to Florida, but we've seen people do it. Famous people are doing it now, journalists and so on and so forth, and reporting about the reactions from their children as they, kind of get used to their new environment. It can be done, but I have to tell you, you mentioned some of my favorite things there: Rumble, RightForge, these are the future to me, because they're places where you can just go and be yourself, no more censorship. We need it so badly. We don't even know what to do. So I'm very, very excited that you were able to join us this evening and to share all the great information. What are you hoping Joe Rogan does as we're closing out here? What is your hope that you're going to see him do? Because you've been a fan, and you get to know a person when you listen to them for hours and hours and hours over the course of years.
One of the things that makes Joe Rogan is he's not a phony. And the moment somebody, for lack of a better phrase, sells out, and I'm not saying he's done this, I'm just saying if somebody sells out, the fans know it. You see this in music, right? Green Day, they sold out, and then fans leave them, and new fans join. You see this time and time and time again. And one of the things that's really hard is Joe Rogan is entitled to earn as much as he can because he's worked hard. He's built a successful business. He's built a successful career. But as soon as he crosses that Rubicon where his fans don't think that they're getting the true Joe Rogan experience, they'll leave him. And what I'm hoping is he is able to push back against Spotify, that he's able to push back against the woke mob, and he is able to retain his autonomy, his independence that makes his show what it is. Because once you lose it, it's gone. And that's not something I want to see for him.
Well, I don't want to see it either, but it doesn't look good when Outkick is reporting that content advisories are headed to Spotify podcasts that discuss COVID. Spotify might not even be anything Joe Rogan does. Spotify, in acting like Facebook and YouTube and all the places where you already see everything on Instagram has a COVID advisory. It's like, you can cough twice and they put a COVID advisory up on there. If they start acting the same way, then people are going to see that and think this is the same social media I'm running away from. And so if Spotify is just another Facebook, I'm going somewhere else. And Joe Rogan can really write his ticket anywhere with 11 million subscribers. He's got to know that. Right now, he's getting punched hard, and he's just trying to stand up. But at some point, he's got to sit down for a minute and go, wait a second. Those 11 million people are here because of me. And then that's when they really have poked the bear, and they're going to get what they came for. They're going to get it. And I can't wait. I can't wait until he realizes that he really is the one in control here. Carl Szabo, VP and General Counsel for NetChoice, at Carl Szabo on Twitter. Thank you, sir, for joining in. Great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.